I thought being a royal guard at Buckingham Palace would be the greatest honor of my life. What they don't tell you in training is that some duties require much more than just wearing a red tunic and looking impressive. My name is James Morrison, and this is the story of my first and almost last night shift at Buckingham Palace. The story I'm about to tell you tonight will reveal one of Buckingham Palace's darkest secrets. If you love true horror stories, stick with me throughout this video, because some secrets only come to light in the dark. My name is James Morrison, and this is the story of my first and almost last night shift at Buckingham Palace. It was a Tuesday in November, when Sergeant Williams pulled me aside after the afternoon guard change ceremony. The tourists had dispersed, having finally lowered their cameras after taking countless photos of us standing motionless. I'd been on day shifts for 3 months, long enough to perfect the art of ignoring the crowd while maintaining my impeccable posture. "Morrison," Williams said, his weathered face more serious than usual, "starting tomorrow, you're moving to the night rotation." A wave of excitement washed over me. Night shifts meant fewer tourist disturbances, more responsibility. "Yes, Sergeant. Which post?" "Internal patrol, between the 2nd and 4th floors." He paused, studying my face. "There are some additional protocols not included in the standard night duty guidelines." The next evening at 11 p.m., I arrived on time, my uniform perfectly pressed. The palace felt different at night. The tourist energy had faded, leaving behind something older, heavier. Corporal Jenkins, a thin man with prematurely gray hair, was waiting to brief me. "All right, Morrison, before handing over the duty, there are some rules you need to know, specifically for the night shift. These aren't written down anywhere, do you understand? They're passed down from guard to guard, from generation to generation." He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, filled with handwritten notes. "These rules are for your survival, Morrison," Jenkins said, his voice devoid of humor. "You will follow them to the letter. You will not question them. You will not try to change them. Do you understand?" I nodded, a strange sense of unease settling in my stomach. "Good. Rule 1. At 3:17 a.m., you will hear footsteps echoing in the corridor on the 3rd floor. Never follow those footsteps. Lean against the wall, close your eyes, and count to 30. "Sergeant, this—" "We don't question, Morrison," Jenkins interrupted sharply. "Rule 2. You will see Queen Victoria's portrait at the top of the grand staircase. If her eyes move, immediately turn your head away and wait 30 seconds. If you keep looking at it, well, no one has ever done that and lived to tell the tale." My heart began to race. Is this a joke? "Rule 3, Jenkins continued, ignoring me. "If you see a blood stain on the red carpet, and you will, report it. Wait until morning, and the stain will disappear on its own. If you tell the cleaning staff, they won't see it either, and they'll think you're crazy." I could feel my hands shaking. "Jenkins, these—" "Rule 4. During the night, you may see people who shouldn't be in the palace. Women in old dresses, military uniforms, children. Ignore them. Never greet them, never speak to them, never follow them. Rule 5, his voice almost a whisper, is the most important. After midnight, if someone says to you, 'Guard, come with me,' even if they look like a royal, don't go. Say, 'I'm on duty, Your Majesty,' and stay where you are. Real royal family members don't talk to guards at night. Never." Jenkins folded the paper and put it in his pocket. "These rules have protected our guards for over a century. A few people broke them." He paused. "We never saw them again." A knot formed in my throat. "Jenkins, never this makes sense. What's the real explanation?" For the first time that night, he smiled, but it wasn't reassuring. "Morrison, this palace has an 800-year history. The things that happen here, the deaths, the secrets, some things stay behind. Your job is to learn to live among them." He handed me the keys. "I'll be back at 6, Morrison. Remember the rules, and if you survive this night, you might not want to do night duty again." As Jenkins disappeared down the corridor, I was left alone in the silence of the vast palace. The keys in my hand felt cold and heavy. As I began my first patrol, Jenkins' words echoed in my mind. At 11:30 p.m., I started climbing the stairs. With each step, the echoes reverberated off the high ceilings, making me feel as though someone were following me. And when I reached the second floor, I saw movement at the end of the corridor. Just a shadow, but definite. The first rule wouldn't be tested for hours, but I already knew this job was far from a typical guard duty.
When the clock struck midnight, I finally understood why Jenkins' rules were so strictly enforced. The palace had transformed into a place completely different from its familiar daytime self. The corridors seemed longer, the shadows deeper, and every sound echoed endlessly. As I finished my patrol on the second floor and climbed to the third, the old wooden stairs creaked under my weight as if warning me. The eyes of the portraits adorning the walls seemed to come to life with the movement of my lantern light, for a moment appearing to truly watch me. When I reached Queen Victoria's portrait, I stopped. Jenkins' second rule came to mind. If the eyes move, turn your head immediately and wait 30 seconds. I looked at the portrait, the old queen's serious face, her black dress, and that sharp gaze. She remained still for a moment, and I relaxed. Perhaps Jenkins was trying to scare me, or maybe all of this was just a way to test the new guards. Just then, the eyes in the portrait shifted toward me. My heart began to race in my chest. I averted my gaze and turned toward the wall, remembering Jenkins' words, "Wait 30 seconds." I began counting. 1, 2, 3. I heard something behind me, a faint rustling sound, as if silk fabric were moving. 4, 5, 6. A breath, cold and trembling. 7, 8, 9. "Young guard," I heard a voice say. An old woman's voice, authoritative and cold. "Turn around." Jenkins' words echoed in my head. Never speak to them. 10, 11, 12. My hands were shaking. The voice grew closer, almost at my ear. "This is disrespectful. When the Queen speaks, one turns to look." 13, 14, 15. I heard footsteps behind me, but they weren't normal footsteps. They sounded like someone was dragging themselves across the floor, like the rustling of silk skirts against stone. 16, 17, 18. "This is my final warning." The voice was now as cold as ice. "Look at me, or—" 29, 30. I turned around. The corridor was empty. I looked at the portrait. Queen Victoria's eyes were still staring straight ahead, as if she hadn't moved at all, but the temperature had changed, as if something very cold had been there just a moment ago. I tried to calm my hands as I continued my patrol. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the tension and Jenkins' stories were taking their toll. But a voice inside me said it wasn't a hallucination. As I walked down the long corridor on the third floor, I began to notice more things. The walls looked normal, but sometimes I caught a glimpse of movement at the corner of my eye, a shadow, a shape, disappearing quickly. On the red carpet, there were stains in certain spots where the color was darker. Jenkins' third rule: if you see a blood stain, report it. Wait until morning. Were those stains really blood? I bent down to take a closer look. Dark brown, with irregular edges. It definitely looked like blood, but old and dried. When I illuminated it with my flashlight, it became clearer, not just a stain, but several drops, as if someone had been injured and had been dripping blood while walking. "Isn't it beautiful?" I heard a voice say. As I lifted my head, I froze. At the end of the corridor stood a woman. She wore a long white nightgown, her hair cascading over her shoulders, her face pale in the lantern's light. But the strangest thing was that her feet weren't touching the ground. She seemed to be floating above the floor. Jenkins' fourth rule: you may see women in old dresses. Ignore them, never greet them. I lowered my eyes and focused on the carpet. I had to ignore her. I had to act as if she weren't there. But the woman's voice echoed through the corridor. "You can see me, young guard. Very few can. I am Anne Boleyn. I have been walking these corridors for years." My heart was racing. Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's executed wife? But her ghost was said to appear at the Tower of London. What was she doing here? "Talk to me," she said, approaching. "No one has spoken to me in years. Loneliness is very hard. Do you understand?" I tried to keep my eyes on the carpet, but I was curious. What would happen if I looked up? Jenkins had only said, "Don't talk to them," not "Don't look at them," but my instincts were telling me where to stop. "Please," his voice now sounded pleading. "Just look once. Don't you want to see my face? The Queen's face?" Footsteps were approaching. He was very close now, a cold breeze brushing my face. I couldn't stop my hands from trembling. "This is your last chance." His voice changed. It wasn't sweet anymore. It was harsh, threatening. "Look at me, or—" At that moment, I heard other footsteps coming from the other end of the corridor. Real footsteps. Heavy, steady, military footsteps. The woman's, or whatever it was, voice stopped immediately. I felt a breeze, and when I looked again, the corridor was empty.
Footsteps were approaching, getting closer and closer. A figure emerged from the darkness, Corporal Williams, whose flashlight forced me to cover my eyes with my hands. "Morrison?" he said in a surprised voice. "What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be on the second floor?" I was on patrol, Sergeant. I was checking the third floor." Williams approached, studying his face. "Are you okay? You look pale." I'm fine, Sergeant." His eyes drifted to the bloodstains on the carpet, but he showed no reaction. It was as if he couldn't see them. "Did Jenkins explain the rules to you?" "Yes, Sergeant." "And you're following them?" "Yes, Sergeant." Williams nodded. "Good. This night is calm. Some nights are harder. You continue your patrol. I'll do my own round." When Williams disappeared down the corridor, I was alone again. But now I knew one thing for certain. These rules were no joke, and the night was just beginning. The clock read 1:15 a.m. There were still 2 hours until 3:17 a.m. And then I would hear the footsteps Jenkins had mentioned. The next hour and a half passed relatively calmly. I saw shadows a few more times, felt the eyes of some portraits move, but I followed Jenkins' rules to the letter. I turned my head, waited, ignored them. It was as if the palace itself was testing me. With every step I took, I felt the weight of centuries-old secrets lingering within these ancient walls. The air in the corridors was different, denser, heavier. It felt as though the breath of the past was hovering over me. At 2:45 a.m., as I climbed the stairs, I heard a faint sound of music behind me. It was classical piano, played very softly. But there was no way music could be playing in the palace at this hour. I stopped and listened. Chopin's Nocturne seemed to be coming from very far away. There was nothing about music in Jenkins' rules. What should I do? Should I follow it? Should I ignore it? The music continued uninterrupted, as if trying to draw me in, but my instincts told me not to follow those sounds. I remembered Jenkins' general principle, when in doubt, do nothing. Leaving the music behind, I went up to the 3rd floor and prepared for Jenkins' most mysterious rule. At 3:17 a.m., you will hear footsteps echoing in the corridor. Never follow these sounds. Lean against the wall, close your eyes, and count to 30.
7, 8, 9. The sounds were much closer now, and I heard something else. Breathing. Heavy, labored breathing, as if someone were very tired or wounded. 10, 11, 12. God, I heard a voice say, a deep, authoritative male voice. But this voice wasn't the voice of the living. It had a cold, metallic tone. Open your eyes. Jenkins' words echoed in my head. Never follow. But this voice was addressing me directly. 13, 14, 15. The king's command, said the voice, now very close to me. Open your eyes and look. I am one of Henry's guards. I have much to show you. Henry? Which Henry? Henry VIII? But he had died centuries ago. 16, 17, 18. I was dying of curiosity. Who exactly were these voices, these figures? What did they want? But Jenkins' warning echoed in my mind. No one who breaks this rule has ever seen the morning. Morrison, the voice said, now knowing my name. Yes, I know you. I've read your file. You're a good soldier. Come with us, and we'll show you the true history of this palace.
20, 21, 22. I could hear their breathing now, warm and fragrant. My heart was beating so fast that I lost count. Beads of sweat trickled down my forehead. You saw Anne Boleyn, said the voice, but you only know the beginning of her story. The real story is much darker, Morrison, and you could be a part of this story. At this point, if you were me, would you open your eyes? Would your curiosity get the better of you, or would you continue to follow the rules? Because at that moment, I was faced with the same choice. 23, 24, 25. The voice grew closer. This is your last chance, Morrison. Come with us or wander forever. You won't get this opportunity again. 26, 27. The footsteps stopped. Suddenly, everything fell silent, but the silence was even more terrifying. It felt like they were watching me. Very good, the voice finally said. You've learned the rules, but don't forget, young guard. We're always here, every night. And one day, if you stay long enough, one day you'll walk with us too. 28, 29, 30. When I opened my eyes, the corridor was empty, but on the floor right in front of me, there were damp footprints. The tracks of large, heavy boots stretched all the way to the end of the corridor, and these footprints were slowly evaporating and disappearing as if they had never been there. With trembling hands, I pulled my watch out of my pocket. 03:29. 12 minutes had passed, but it felt like hours to me. The footprints had completely vanished by then. After that night, I was never the same again. What I saw and heard changed me forever, but this was only the beginning. Much darker secrets awaited me.
At 4 a.m., I had come to accept that this palace was completely different from what I had imagined during the day. Every corridor, every room carried the weight of the past, and that weight transformed into something alive at night. As I climbed from the 3rd floor to the 4th, the creaking of the stairs sounded different. It was as if each step were telling a story. How many guards had climbed these stairs? How many had returned? While on patrol on the 4th floor, I noticed a light coming from the end of the corridor. It was a soft, golden light, flickering on and off, like candlelight, but there should have been electricity in that room. I approached slowly. The light was coming from the Queen's private study. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear low voices from inside. Voices talking, but no one should have been here at this hour. Jenkins' 5th rule echoed in my mind. If someone says to you, "Guard, come with me," even if they look like a member of the royal family, don't go. Real members of the royal family don't talk to guards at night. But the voices inside weren't addressing me. They were talking among themselves. Curious, I peered through the crack in the door.
There were 5 people sitting inside, or rather 5 figures. They were sitting around a large oval table in the flickering light of candles, pretending to drink tea. But the teacups were empty, and none of them seemed to be drinking. The first figure was an old woman dressed in black from the Victorian era. She wore pearl necklaces and brooches, but they all looked faded and dull. The second was a man in a military uniform, but the uniform was from a period I didn't recognize. He had medals on his chest, but they didn't look real either. His face looked serious and wounded. The third was a young woman in a dress from the 1920s. Her hair was cut short, and her eyes were large but vacant. She kept moving her hands as if holding something invisible. The fourth was a middle-aged man in clothing from the early 1800s. He wore a jacket and bow tie, but the colors were faded and worn. And the fifth was wearing modern clothing, a suit, but in an old-fashioned style, from the 1990s or so. And his face looked very familiar. "The new guard is adapting," said the Victorian-era woman. Her voice sounded unreal, as if it were coming from very far away. "He's following the rules. It's still early, the first night. The real test comes later. I waited 18 years until that night when he broke the rules." "Did you die in battle?" asked the young woman. Her voice was high-pitched and childlike. "No, here, in these corridors. I heard a voice saying not to follow it, but I did, and then—" The young woman smiled, but that smile made me uneasy. "I died from something similar. I was dancing. The music was beautiful. I followed the music until She paused. Until I disappeared.
Some can't resist, said the middle-aged man. They get curious, test the rules. Remember last year? Was it Smith? He went crazy on the second night. The figure in modern clothing raised his head. Smith broke the rules, he said, his voice clearer, closer than the others. He tried to talk to Anne Boleyn. Then he stayed with us, forever. Now he's one of us. I froze. I remembered a guard named Smith. He had resigned suddenly 6 months ago. At least, that's what they said. But now, the figure in modern clothing suddenly turned his head and looked directly at me. I could see his face clearly now. No, this couldn't be. This was Smith. But his eyes weren't the eyes of the living. They were dull, expressionless, like glass. "Hello, Morrison," he said, his voice now as clear as if I were listening at the door. "Would you like to come in for tea with us?" I stumbled backward. This was the 5th rule itself. If someone says to you, "Guard, come with me," even if they look like a member of the royal family, don't go. The other figures began to rise as well. They were all looking at me now, their eyes holding the same blank expression. "Come, Morrison," Smith said as he stood up. "Join us now. It's much easier. No rules, no fear, just silence." "We're so alone here," the young woman said. "Join us. Let's dance. I can tell my war stories." How lovely that would be. "I am on duty, Your Majesty," I said, my voice trembling, as Jenkins had instructed. Smith smiled, but it was a cold, terrifying smile. "Smart boy. But you know, Morrison, sooner or later, they all join us. You can't work in this palace for much longer. The past is too heavy." "Yes," said the Victorian-era woman, "the past grows heavier every night, and one day that weight will crush you too." The figures began to walk toward me, emerging from around the table, but there was no sound of footsteps. It was as if they were gliding across the floor. "Just one step," said Smith. "Take one step through the door and it will all be over. You won't be afraid anymore. You won't worry. You'll stay with us." What would you do at this point? If an old friend made you such an offer, how would you resist? The hardest part for me at that moment was not knowing whether Smith was really Smith. The door suddenly closed, the light went out, the corridor was plunged back into darkness. But there were still sounds coming from inside. Whispers, calls. "Morrison." Smith's voice came from behind the door. "You escaped tonight, but tomorrow night? Tomorrow night will be harder."
At 5 a.m., I could feel morning approaching. The first light filtering through the windows was beginning to dispel the darkness. Perhaps the worst was over. I had followed Jenkins' rules and passed all the tests. But I was wrong. The biggest test was yet to come. When I went down to the 2nd floor for my final patrol, it should have been the quietest moment of the hour. But the corridor was far from quiet. Music was playing in the distance, waltz music, and footsteps, the sounds of dancing couples. At the end of the corridor, I saw someone waiting. A real person. At least, that's what it looked like. It was Queen Elizabeth, the real queen, dressed in modern clothes, but her face looked tired and old. She was holding a small bag, as if she were getting ready to go somewhere. She walked toward me, each step clear and real. The footsteps sounded normal. not gliding like the other figures. "Guard," she said in her familiar voice. "You need to come with me." My heart raced. This was the fifth rule itself. But this was the real Queen Elizabeth, wasn't it? How could I refuse her? "There's an emergency," she said as she approached. "The palace's security is at risk. You need to escort me to my private room immediately. I can't trust anyone else." I was confused. Were Jenkins' rules for ghosts from the past, or did they apply to real royal family members too? But Jenkins had been very clear. Real royal family members never speak to the guards at night. Never.
"Your Majesty," I said carefully, "according to protocol before contacting you—" "Protocol?" she interrupted, her voice hardening. "I am your queen. Protocol is what I say it is. And now I command you, come with me." But something was wrong. The queen's eyes, her eyes weren't right. They were too bright, too clear, as if illuminated from within. And despite the sounds beneath her feet, the rhythm of the sounds was wrong, too regular, too perfect. "There are intruders in this palace," said the queen, her voice growing more urgent. "They are trying to escape with my family. You must take me to the safe room, now." Jenkins' words echoed in my head. Royal family members do not speak to night guards. But what if it was a real emergency? What if the queen was truly in danger? "Morrison," the queen said, now knowing my name. "I recognize you. I read your file. You are a reliable soldier. That is why I chose you." What would you do in this situation? Could you refuse a royal's order? If there was a real danger and you didn't help, could you live with the consequences? That's exactly what I was thinking at that moment. "Your Majesty," I said hesitantly, "if there's a real emergency, I need to call the other security guards." No one else can be trusted. Only you can help me." The queen's face began to change. The soft lines hardened. Her eyes grew larger and brighter. Her voice was changing too, becoming deeper, more metallic. "I'm on duty, Your Majesty," I said, remembering Jenkins' words. "I can't abandon my post." The queen's face suddenly changed completely. Her modern clothes turned into an old, torn dress. Her face aged, her hair turned gray, and her eyes began to sink. And most terrifying of all, a deep red line appeared on her neck. "Anne Boleyn," I whispered. "Yes," the figure said, now in a completely different tone of voice. The figure continued to change. Anne Boleyn's appearance began to fade, replaced by something older, more terrifying. As her eyes darkened completely, her hand reached out and pointed at me. "3 refusals," she said, her voice no longer human.
Sounds began to come from both sides of the corridor. Footsteps, whispers, the clanking of armor. Figures began to emerge from the darkness. Dozens of figures, centuries-old royalty, guards, servants. They were all approaching me. Smith was among them, dressed in a modern suit. Beside him was a Victorian-era woman, a young dancer, a soldier. All of them approached me with the same blank stares. "Stay with us now," said Anne Boleyn. "Forever. You've learned the rules well, but enough is enough. Come and join us." "We're so alone," said Smith. "And you're one of us now." "No!" I shouted. "I'm alive! I'm real!" "Is that so?" said Anne Boleyn with a smile. Then look at us, Morrison. Really look. The corridor suddenly became much brighter, and what I saw at that moment froze me in my tracks. The figures weren't there. None of them were. There was only me, standing in the middle of the corridor, talking to myself. But worse still, I could see myself in the mirror, and my reflection had the same lifeless eyes as the others. At that moment, I heard real footsteps behind me. Sergeant Williams appeared in the corridor, and the light from his lantern scattered all the false images. "Morrison!" he shouted. "Get out of here, now!" I ran, following Williams down the stairs toward the main floor. Sounds were coming from behind us, but they weren't real sounds. Whispers, screams, angry voices. "You can't escape, Morrison," Anne Boleyn's voice echoed. "You're one of us now." When we reached the main floor, William stopped. He was out of breath, his face drenched in sweat. "Are you okay?" he asked. I think so. But Williams, the things I saw." "I know, that was the final test, the hardest one." "What did you see?" he asked. I told him everything, the Queen's visit, the encounter with Anne Boleyn, Smith and the other figures, and finally the terrifying reflection I saw in the mirror. William shook his head. "You did well, Morrison. You followed the rules, but what? What you saw in the final test, that thing was real. You're starting to change. Everyone who works in this palace for too long changes." "What do you mean?" Williams looked out the window. Daylight was streaming in from outside. "This palace has an 800-year history, Morrison. Thousands of people have lived here, worked here, died here. Some don't want to leave, and they're looking for new friends. But when you start searching, you start to become like them." Smith broke the rules. On the second night, he tried to talk to Anne Boleyn. After that, something else happened. He's still here, but he's not alive anymore. He's invisible during the day, but at night he joins us. My throat tightened. "And am I safe because I followed the rules?"
Deep Williams smiled, but it wasn't reassuring. "You're safe tonight. But Morrison, night shift isn't a job you can do for long. Most guards ask to be transferred after 6 months. The smart ones do it in the first 2 weeks. Why? Because every night you change a little more. You become a little more like them. And one day, there's no difference left."
Jenkins arrived at 6 a.m. for the shift change. My face must have been pale because he frowned as soon as he saw me. "First night," he said simply. "How did it go?" "I followed all the rules," I said, my voice still trembling. "Good. Most people break at least one on their first night. You're different, Morrison." He paused, studying my face. "But you look tired." "Jenkins," I said uncertainly, "how much longer will this go on? I mean, do these things happen every night?" Jenkins took the keys, slipping his hands into his coat pockets. "Every night. Sometimes less, sometimes more. But something happens every night. The palace is alive, Morrison. And at night, the past blends into the present." "Are there any other rules? Anything I should know?" A strange expression appeared on Jenkins' face. "Oh yes," he said slowly. "There are dozens more. But you'll learn them in time, if you stay long enough." "What do you mean?" "The 6th rule. Don't stare into mirrors for too long, especially after midnight. Your reflection starts to change."
The 7th rule: if you hear your own voice echoing in the corridors, don't go toward it. It means someone else is mimicking your voice. The 8th rule. Jenkins paused. The 8th rule is the most important. If after a night shift you go home and look at yourself in the mirror and your eyes look different, dull, distant, that night is your last. The next day, request a transfer. My heart raced. Jenkins, I looked at myself in the mirror tonight and... I know, Jenkins said quietly. Williams told me. It's not too late yet, but you're getting close. To what? Becoming one of them. Jenkins looked out the window. Morrison, the hardest part of this job is that over time, this world starts to feel more real. The normal world becomes mundane, and the night world here becomes more appealing. He was right. When I stepped outside, London's morning traffic had begun. Ordinary people were going to work, living their ordinary lives. But none of them knew what Buckingham Palace became at night, and strangely, their ignorance felt tragic to me. On the bus home, I looked out the window. Everyone was engrossed in their daily lives, checking their phones, reading the newspaper. None of them had experienced anything as deep or meaningful as what had happened the night before. None of them had felt the weight of history. This thought troubled me. That was what Jenkins had said. The normal world was becoming mundane, while the night world was growing more appealing. When I got home, my wife Sarah was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She smiled when she saw me. "How was your first night?" she asked. "Fine," I said, knowing I couldn't tell her the truth. It was pretty quiet. But as I looked at Sarah's face, I felt as though I were seeing her from a great distance, as though there were an invisible wall between us. She was living in the normal world. I was now caught between two worlds. I looked in the mirror in the bathroom. My eyes were a little different. Deeper. More distant. Jenkins' 8th rule echoed in my mind. Would you keep this secret? From your family? Your friends? Or would you rather tell them and be treated like a madman? I couldn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling and thought about the night. Smith's words echoed in my head. We're very alone here. And William's warning. You're changing a little more every night. When evening came, as I put on my uniform again, I felt a strange excitement. Not fear. Excitement. As if I were going home. The feeling itself frightened me.
3 months later, I learned that Jenkins' rules were only the beginning. Every night brought new rules, new protocols, new encounters, and every night I changed a little more. 9th rule: if you hear piano music at 1 a.m., find the room where the music is coming from, but do not enter. Wait at the door and listen until the music stops. This is Princess Margaret's spirit, and listening to the music helps her find peace. 10th rule: if you hear children's voices in the corridor, quietly move away. These are the spirits of lost princes who have learned to mimic the living. 11th rule: at 4:44 a.m., all clocks stop. This lasts for 3 minutes. During this time, do not move, not even to breathe. This is the moment when time itself visits the palace. I often saw Smith on night shifts now, but instead of harming me, he was giving me warnings. Sometimes we even chatted. "Be careful, Morrison," he said last night. "They're getting used to you. That's not a good thing." "Why?" I asked. "Because eventually they invite the people they get used to. And when the invitation comes, it's very hard to refuse." He was right. The palace's nighttime inhabitants had grown accustomed to me.
Anne Boleyn no longer tried to speak to me. She just nodded as she glided past in the corridor. Victoria's portrait was still moving, but it no longer felt like a threat, more like a familiar friend's gesture.
And I was getting used to them too. Strangely enough, I had even begun to miss them. During the day when I was at home, I would impatiently wait for night to come. This frightened me. William's words echoed in my head. Sooner or later, they will all join us. The distance between Sarah and me was growing. I couldn't tell her about these experiences, and she couldn't understand why I had changed so much. "It's like you're living in another world," she said last week. "Your eyes are always far away, always somewhere else." She was right, because I really was living in another world, and that world was becoming more real every day. A week earlier, my biggest test had come. Anne Boleyn had extended a direct invitation to me. "Morrison," she had said that night, "you're ready now. Come with us. Stay with us forever." "Why?" I had asked, forgetting Jenkins' rules. "Because you're one of us now. The normal world can't understand you anymore, but we do. We accept you." At that moment, the invitation seemed so appealing. No fear, no anxiety, just understanding, acceptance, and a friendship that would last forever. But at the last moment, I pulled myself together. "I'm on duty," I said. Anne Boleyn was disappointed. "All right, Morrison, but the offer is always open. And know this, there's no going back. You are now a part of our world." Today, I was thinking about submitting my transfer request, but I hadn't done it yet, because I now knew that the secrets I had learned in this palace couldn't be found anywhere else. And perhaps those secrets were changing me, but was it for the worse, or just differently? When I looked in the mirror, my eyes had completely changed. According to Jenkins' 8th rule, I should have already submitted my transfer request, but I couldn't. What would you do? Would you return to the known safe world and live an ordinary life? Or would you stay in this magical world, risking getting lost in the depths of the unknown? Tonight, I will go again. I will learn Jenkins' new rules. I will speak with Smith if I see him. I will reconsider Anne Boleyn's offer, and perhaps I will finally understand who I really am. Because there is a truth that those who see the ordinary cannot comprehend. Once the certain secrets are learned, you can no longer live as you did before. And perhaps that is not such a bad thing. It's 20 minutes to 10:30 p.m. I'm putting on my uniform, grabbing my keys, and heading back to Buckingham Palace, that living past. Because now I'm a part of it too, and it both scares me and, strangely, makes me feel like I'm coming home. Sarah asked me tonight, "Are you thinking of quitting this job?" "I don't know," I said, and I really didn't know. Maybe I'll leave tomorrow. Maybe I'll never leave. Thank you for listening to this story. Let me know in the comments, would you have requested a transfer, or would you have stayed to uncover the secrets? If you were in Morrison's shoes, would you have accepted Anne Boleyn's final offer? And if you've had any paranormal experiences, don't forget to share them. Don't forget to subscribe for more true horror stories, because Britain's darkest secrets are still waiting to be told.